Welcome to The Healthy Advisor, a podcast from WealthManagement.com focused on advisors' personal well-being and healing. I'm Diana Britton, managing editor of WealthManagement.com, and in this podcast we explore some of the struggles and personal development issues facing advisors and financial services professionals, and how to get to a place of healing for mind, body, and spirit. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Healthy Advisor podcast. Thanks for joining us. As you may know, this is the podcast focused on financial advisor health and well-being. And today's guest is in the middle of it all right now. Her name is Lisa Erickson. She just recently retired as head of the Public Markets Due Diligence team in Wealth Management's asset management group at U.S. Bank. Lisa, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Diana, it's an honor. Thank you for having me.
So, in an article on U.S. Bank's website, the author said Lisa is known among her peers as a pioneer in her field and as someone who always puts the needs of her clients first. During her 12-year career at U.S. Bank, she was part of a team that managed more than $500 billion in assets for clients and helped design and research customized investment portfolios. But in addition to her business acumen, she was best known, her colleagues have said, for her selflessness, her positivity, and character. And I mean, just in the short time that I've known Lisa, I totally agree. She's just a wonderful, gentle person. But yeah, after a 37-year career in financial services, Lisa retired in early April after being diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And she now enters kind of a new phase of her life, having to deal with this illness. And she's going to talk about some of the personal struggles she's had in her life, including the Parkinson's. But Lisa, I just wanted to start by, you take us back. How did you get into the financial services industry in the first place?
Well, Diana, first and foremost, thank you for the kind words. It really means a lot. And I think when people look back, including myself, you don't think you've done that much. But then when it comes to times like this, you do realize how much other people care. But as far as my original beginning in financial services, it really was a little bit of a combination of both interest as well as just how life takes its windy path. So when I was back in college, I knew I wanted to do something in the business world with a corporation, but I was pretty open as far as whether that be finance or marketing. And I was also pretty flexible on the type of industry. I didn't have just one area set in mind. So I went off on my interview path and I ran across what was then a smaller firm, but very interesting still, Russell Investments. And I ended up falling in love with them and they liked me as well. And so they ended up providing two opportunities to me. One was in research and one was in trading. And just being almost a brand new graduate out of college, it was really hard to decide because they both really sounded interesting. And I love both of my potential managers. So for whatever reason, I just decided to take the research path. And looking back, that just ended up being such a wonderful choice because it matched my personality well. I wanted to do some stuff that was more analytical, but still have an opportunity to interact with clients and the FAs who would be serving them. And it really offered both of those, as well as just the privilege of being able to serve clients and be able to help them meet their financial goals.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you made the right choice there. And, you had a long career in this industry. And I know that you got married to your husband, Chris, in 2017. I think that was your second marriage, but, you started to build a life with him then. Tell me a little bit about how you met Chris, and because I know, and you both kind of came into the marriage with kids, and I don't know, just tell me about how you guys met.
Yeah, well, it really was, again, just a combination of a little bit of interest in life pathing. So we had been going to the same fairly large church in our area for
Mm,
quite some time and knew each other
mhm.
due to kids and different activities where we crossed paths. But for whatever reason, one day he was stopping by our coffee corner where I happened to be sitting down reading the Wall Street Journal in between services. And he said, "What are you doing with the Wall Street Journal here at church in between services?" And so I said, "Well, sit down and I'll tell you." And so we just had a great conversation and hit it off. And that led to a second coffee encounter. And the story goes from there.
Yeah. And I mean, I know that you in 2020, he got a staph infection, and that was kind of a difficult time for you and your family. What happened during that time?
Yeah, you put it well. It was really a tough time. And it was what I would call like a roll with the punches kind of period, because if we all think back to 2020, it was just an unusual period where we all got hit with one thing out of, after another, sort of from out of the blue. And so besides, of course, at the beginning of the year, like all of us had to adjust to working from home and being holed up, we did get news in May that Chris was ill. And that was a really huge surprise because Chris was a pretty active, healthy guy. He was on two different baseball teams as well as a hockey league. And what had happened was he contracted staph, which is just a typical bacteria that floats around and usually is just more of an irritation and a nuisance. But in this case, the staph had gotten into his bloodstream. And when staph gets into the bloodstream, it basically has free roam traveling around your body and starts attacking different parts and different functions. And so that really began a journey where he ended up in the ER first and then in the hospital for a couple of months and just battling one thing after another. And he was fairly resilient at first, but as time went on, there was enough damage that he had to undergo actually over 10 surgeries trying to fight it with the doctor's help. But ultimately, he just wasn't able to make it. So we went basically from healthy in April to in the hospital in May, and he passed by July.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that. Tell me about those final days with him. What were they like? And did you and the kids get a chance to say goodbye?
Well, yes and no, and certainly on goodbye, and certainly they were very tough days. The way I look back and think about them is it was really a darned if you do and darned if you don't type of period. As Chris was really trying to battle off that staph infection in the hospital, it ultimately ended up attacking his heart and attacked it so vigorously that he ended up having it near the end of his stay tear. And while the doctors were valiant and amazing and really quick to respond, and they were able to actually patch that up, he was without oxygen, including his brain, for several minutes, and that did end
Mm,
up causing considerable brain damage. And he had already been unconscious going into that, but obviously that worsened the situation. So we were in that kind of tough spot where we could still hope for a miracle, but if and when that miracle would happen was very indeterminate. So it was a very unsettled kind of possible hope. And then the other, alternative obviously was that he would pass, whether, just naturally or whether we would have to make the decision to pull him off one of the multiple life support systems he was on. So in some ways it ended up being a blessing because a couple of weeks after the heart surgery, he did end up just passing naturally. And it was at least some solace that we didn't have to make one of those tough, pull the life support decision
mm,
moments. But obviously it was heartbreaking because he didn't end up making it.
gosh. And I know, after his passing, you know, that was a really difficult adjustment for both you and the kids, and it was just so sudden, and he was so healthy. But, what was the aftermath of his passing?
Well, it really was a period of mixed emotions. On the one hand, again, after being just through such a tumultuous couple of months, there was some solace and some, help in terms of being able to know that there was a resolution and to pour our hearts into building out his celebration of life service. And of course, friends and family were really amazing and supportive. But, it's when someone passes that you really begin to grieve. And so obviously that was the hard part of it. And I just took the opportunity, knowing I had never been through losing a significant person before, to work with a counselor to help me in my grieving process. And two of the things, Diana, that I learned from this wonderful counselor was that one, grieving is not a linear process. And second, that grieving can take time, more time than you expect. And so what I really had to learn was just to give myself the opening to have really good days, when I would be able to have some fond and happy memories, but also obviously just the loneliness and discouragement, thinking, gosh, I obviously just lost my life partner, and working through that. And that was a little hard for me because I'm used to being a person that's go get 'em and usually pretty happy and upbeat. So that was obviously a new experience. And, on the timing thing, I had no idea, but grieving really can even happen, a couple of years, 3 or 4 years later than the actual event that causes it. And while, it may be most poignant at the very beginning, even now, and it's not very frequent, but even now there may be situations where I encounter something or I'm in a situation that reminds me of something he did or what we had, and it's still tough.
Yeah, I mean, it's only been 5 years. I mean, I totally know what you mean. And how did you kind of navigate things with the kids?
Well, that definitely was another component, because a third lesson I suppose I learned was that while there's some commonalities to grieving, it's an individual process and a different process for each person. And for some of the kids, they could process it better in some ways than other kids would process it in different ways. So just some great examples. One of our girls is very artistic and has some strong gifts in that area. And so she was able to do create a beautiful dance. She's trained in dance, and create that as her own sort of personal remembrance for her father. For, one of my sons, it was some mementos that he had from Chris and was able to cherish and use that to have fond memories. For myself, I think part of what helped me, because I am kind of a go get 'em up person, was the fact that, I had the kids and I could spend some time, obviously not just grieving, but helping to take care of them. And there was a comfort in the fact that not only did that help me not just think about myself, but also knowing that that's what Chris would have wanted, is for me to help the kids through that period of transition.
Yeah. Yeah, and so Lisa, I know you just recently retired after a great run in the industry, but it just came a little bit earlier than you had hoped. So tell us about that decision to retire and what led to that decision.
Well, the decision to retire, I had always envisioned as one of those happy moments where you just say, wow, that was, a career well done. And now I'm ready and I'm going to enjoy this time where I can travel some and spend time with family. Unfortunately, it didn't quite turn out that way. Although, as you'll hopefully we'll talk about in a bit, it is something that I still am grateful that I have this time to be retired. But for me, the retirement really was spawned by some unfortunate news that I just received earlier this year. But as you noted, the Parkinson's diagnosis, but it really started back in 2024 when I began to notice more health issues. And at first, as I sort of doggedly pursued each one, we thought they were all independent circumstances. But as the year progressed, a doctor noted that, gosh, I'm concerned that there actually is something underlying all of these, and it may be Parkinson's. And between that and the fact that as I really hit the last couple of months in the year, the symptoms really started to worsen at a more accelerating rate. It made me realize for once that as much as I loved my team and my company and my career, that, if I didn't do something to address the difficulties I was having, I would really kick myself if I, didn't take more time for self-care. So at that point, I actually seriously began working with my financial advisor to see if I did retire earlier than I intended, would I be in an okay financial position? And again, fortunately, because of the great work she had done with me, I was able to have that opportunity. So when the diagnosis did come in January, that did enable me to announce my retirement.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of is a great example of the value financial advisors bring, right? I mean, especially when things like this come up, unexpected things like this. Just a little bit of background about Parkinson's. Parkinson's disease is a movement disorder of the nervous system that worsens over time. The nervous system is a network of nerve cells that controls many parts of the body, including movement, and symptoms start slowly. The first symptom may be a barely noticeable tremor in just one hand or sometimes a foot or the jaw. A tremor is common in Parkinson's disease, but the disorder also may cause stiffness, slowing of movement, and trouble with balance that raises the risks of falls. In Parkinson's disease, nerve cells in the brain called neurons slowly break down or die. And many symptoms are caused by a loss of neurons that produce a chemical messenger in the brain called dopamine. A lot of us know that that chemical. Decreased dopamine can lead to irregular brain activity. This causes movement problems and other symptoms of Parkinson's disease. In the US, nearly 1 million people are living with Parkinson's, and an estimated 90,000 new diagnoses every year. It's the second most common neurodegenerative disease after Alzheimer's. And, perhaps the most famous case is that of Michael J. Fox, who was diagnosed with the disease in 1991 at the age of 29, very young. And he's become a prominent advocate for Parkinson's research. But Lisa, when you got that diagnosis in January, how did you react? How did you feel? What was going through your mind at that time?
Well, it was really a very tough hit that I took in January, even tougher than the news I had received of Chris's illness 5 years earlier. And I think, part of it was that it just felt like another big body blow just after having, a tough illness. And then my husband passed just a few years earlier. And then perhaps the fact that, it was myself, not only my husband, but now me directly. So I really did go through a period of sadness, madness. It's not fair. But, I think what helped me with my faith is that I knew that I had a God who would allow me to be sad, mad, and angry, and to do that directly with him. So, that helped. I just realized I needed to walk that path for some time. And also, obviously, family, friends, and colleagues were an amazing help in terms of just listening and really being able to encourage me at the appropriate times as well. And so that really led to a place of acceptance. And I think, the fact is that I did care about my team so much, eventually I was able to turn my attention to really trying to set up my team the best I could. Obviously, the news was unexpected on all fronts. And so whatever I could do to help them continue the amazing work that they already do with helping clients and FAs, we wanted to do that.
I guess I wonder if you can, expand on that a little bit more. I mean, what are some of the coping mechanisms and tools and things that have gotten you through these really difficult times in your life? I mean, you're still in it. You're not obviously through it. It's a long journey, but what are some of the things that help you on a daily basis?
Well, I think as you may have picked up in the answer I just gave, a big part of it for me was faith. And
Mm.
I think faith, knowing that I have a God who wants to not just walk with me through the happy times, but I can be real with him in the hard times as well. But part of that is too knowing that I think all believing that all things can be used for the good. And I know even though sometimes, I still, to your point, have days that it's discouraging more so than others. I do look back at my past experiences where things were tough, even if maybe perhaps not as tough as a chronic ill diagnosis. But I realized that those were the times that I've grown the most and been able to, through the growth of my character and lessons learned, been able to do more and help more. And so that is something I firmly believe and hang on to. And I think really the other key thing is a wonderful piece of advice that one of my friends gave me as I was walking through this. And he said, Lisa, just try to give thanks in all circumstances. And again, that doesn't mean I have to be a happy camper or pretend that things are hunky dory every day, but
Mm.
it is good every once in a while to step back and just be thankful for all those small daily blessings that come. And even now I can see how, the Parkinson's is helping me in some ways. I mean, I still wish I didn't have it, but things like, it's made me appreciate all the time that I do have, to not take for granted a date night with my son, or, a really funny joke that I'm having with a friend, or even a, beautiful sunshine coming up in the morning. So those are the things I think that would make a difference. And maybe just one final word is just learning to put one foot in front of the other. So sometimes when I'm tired, I just have to remember, I just have to do the next thing, and that's the victory.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm really appreciative that you're here on this podcast telling me your story, when you're going through this. How are you feeling now, and what's your prognosis?
Well, again, while we've talked about some of the hard things, I really feel blessed to be where I am, having had the opportunity to retire and be in a position to have the resources to do so. My prognosis is that I have expected to have 5 to 10 years in this first phase that's, relatively more mild, where I can still be fairly independent. And then it's expected maybe 10-ish years where things start to get progressively more difficult, whether it's, movement, or the loss of dopamine can also affect mental and behavioral abilities as well. And so perhaps needing more caregiving at that point, and then a couple of years where it may be more difficult. So it is not the best, obviously, thing to think about, but I also am glad that, I do have some time where I can again value the moments I do have to enjoy with family and friends.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, how have you been thinking about this next phase of your life?
Well, there was another wonderful set of words that a friend gave me. And he told me, Lisa, I just firmly believe that these will be the best years of your life. And again, it may not necessarily feel that way every day, because I sometimes still have times where I hear about, more progressed cases, and that's a little scary. But I truly believe that these can and will be the best years of my life. And again, the fact that I have an opportunity to step back and be the best me I can physically and mentally in these circumstances is a huge blessing. I have concentrated so long on my career and other things. It's good to take a step back and make sure I refocus on myself and taking care of my family. And, the other thing I've realized is that I'm growing through learning things like giving is not just always doing things for others, but it's also learning how to receive. And that's, again, maybe something a little bit hard for me, but being encouraged by friends that when they can do things for me, that actually really gives life to them. And so there are things that I can do with that, as well as serving with the Parkinson's community and doing more things with my church that I'm excited to tackle some new challenges.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and it's obviously that you really touched a lot of people, your coworkers and peers in the industry, just have such good things to say about you and have, supported you through this process. So I know that, Parkinson's, like we mentioned, is the second most common neuro disorder behind Alzheimer's. And that means that a lot of advisors may come across it. And, whether they have a client diagnosed with it, or, a family member or a friend, or, a client's relatives may be diagnosed with it. What do you hope advisors would take away from hearing your story?
Well, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, Diana, is that financial advising can make a huge difference. In fact, I like to call it a noble profession, because what you're doing is one of the most important things that could be done is enabling and equipping people with the ability to have the financial resources they need to reach their particular goals and to be set up the way they want. And so, again, you can see that phase in my story, that had I not had a wonderful advisor to work with for all these years, that, I wouldn't be able to have responded to this situation the way I did. The second thing I guess I think about is the fact that now, maybe hopefully hearing a little bit of the story, knowing that people who face chronic disease or have to support someone with chronic disease, just to remember that it's a situation where giving grace and patience can make a difference. These folks, such as myself, are facing not only, some difficult news, but something that continues to evolve over time. And so just understanding that maybe some of the decisions they have to make may be tough, that they may be faced with some mental or behavioral or physical challenges that, again, may make them a little bit more wonky to work with at times. But if you can give that understanding, that's just such a huge gift that you can provide as part of your service and calling towards them. And third is, maybe I just say, please don't forget about yourselves. I certainly didn't expect to get hit with this diagnosis. I, like my husband, been a pretty healthy person, really active, exercising a lot, enjoying life. But sometimes we get, hit from the side with stuff that we don't want to hear. And so maybe taking the opportunity to look at your own financial plan and making sure that you're also working on that yourself, I think, is good insurance, not just for your family, but obviously also a testimony to your clients.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Lisa, you've just, to go through both of these really hard things. I mean, first the passing of Chris, and then, entering your own health crisis now, and just being faced with a lot of the uncertainty of it. I just, you've just done it in such a graceful and positive way. Just thank you for being so vulnerable about it. I'm afraid we're just about out of time, but I would like to thank my guest, Lisa Erickson, for being on the podcast and sharing her story with me. Lisa, thank you so much for opening up about it.
Thank you, Diane. It's been a real honor.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of takeaways here for advisors as well. So thank you so much. If you'd like to reach out to Lisa, you can find her on LinkedIn. And if you have a struggle yourself and you wish to share your experiences and help others in similar situations, please feel free to reach out to me at diana.britton@informa.com. I'd like to thank you for listening to The Healthy Advisor. If you've not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This is Diana Britton reminding you that where there's healing, there is hope. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to The Healthy Advisor, a podcast focused on advisors' personal well-being and healing. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of WealthManagement.com. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional advice. Always seek the advice of your healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your particular situation.